Hello and welcome back to DriveDriverDriven. I'm Humble and we're back here on the Blunicorn rebuild. Instead of working on the back of the chassis, I had a bunch of parts come in, and so we're going to kind of do part 2 on the brakes and the oil to water heat exchanger that I had some trouble with before. So first up we'll do the brakes from the old ones to the new ones. So here on the bench is this is what the old master cylinders looked like. These were Girling cylinders. What I didn't like about them so much was that the reservoir here is cast into the master cylinder as just one large body, basically. And it had this untreated steel cap for it that just rusted and corroded. Ultima supplies a warning or a low fluid warning switch that fits inside of this as well, that takes up some of the volume inside of this. And with that small volume plus the switch, I just wasn't comfortable with the amount of fluid that was in here, especially for doing a lot of track days like I did. So I had found this extension, this top part that fits on the top. And what that allowed me to do is it gave me a little more fluid capacity, but it also allowed me to look at a glance and see how much fluid I had up in here. I really like that about it, but it's kind of a janky looking setup. And so that part of it I wasn't too happy with. Otherwise, these cylinders themselves worked fine. They held up to track abuse. Everything about them was okay. For whatever reason, I just wasn't happy with this design. So moving on, we have these guys. So these are Tilton master cylinders. I've used Wilwood and Tilton master cylinders in the past. Various Tilton pedal sets, various Wilwood pedal sets. I've used the Tilton 74, 75, and 76 series. They have some nicer ones now that would resolve some of the problems I'm about to show you, but they do not fit in the Ultima. So the reason I'm switching to this guy is I like this design a little bit better. I like the port that's on the top, which will take either a barb or an AN fitting. Extra port here on the back and the top so that I could run a pressure sensor here. Although my pressure sensors happen to be the wrong thread to use this. This is a imperial thread versus a metric thread. You know, I just have to use a T like I was using before. With a different sensor, I could just pop it right into the back here. Otherwise, you could use these for multiple circuits. So if you happen to have a front and rear that were the same size, you could use this for both, just to cut down on weight, etc. But anyway, so I really like these designs. I really like these master cylinders, and they've never done me wrong. So I wanted to retrofit these into the Ultima, and instead of going with these little reservoirs, I wanted to use this. So I've run similar setups to this in the past. I really like the Tilton design here. So it's at a glance, I can check my fluid levels, and this will mount up on the sort of firewall here on the front of the clamshell when that's all in place. And it's much easier to reach this if I do need to put fluids in versus reaching all the way down to the bottom of the car there. Speaking of the bottom of the car, so you can see I have our clutch master cylinder in place here already. On the other side, I know it's a little dark, you can see everything's already set up. This is our travel on the master cylinder. And what I wanted to point out was that the angle that these sit at is not as bad as people had feared, but it is too tight to use out of the box. So what I had to do is, you can see I've got 3 washers stacked up on here. And if I grab the other master cylinder, down here, there's like a ball end on the push rod. And there's a seal or a little aluminum disc that pulls everything together And if the angle sits down like this, and if it's down too far, the push rod here will rub on that disc, and it'll introduce debris and garbage and whatever in there, and eventually that'll wear out the seals over time and damage the master cylinder, leading to a failure. So what I had to do was, by popping some washers down on the bottom, I've adjusted the angle ever so slightly to keep this push rod angle within the 5-degree limit or thereabouts, so that the push rod does not rub on that little aluminum disc, and then you have a nice clean travel on this push rod, so it doesn't rub when you're pushing the pedal back and forth. With that, I can go ahead and put these master cylinders in, and we can get these set up for the brakes. Okay, master cylinders are in. I did make a couple of changes because of a couple changes. So our clutch pedal has more travel than it used to, and I was worried that I would need a little more fluid volume to achieve the same amount of travel back at the slave cylinder. So to compensate, I stepped up one size on master cylinder for the clutch. So I went from a 0.70 to a 0.75. Not too big of a difference, but I think that'll be right about where I was previously. I was really happy with the travel before, and there's some other changes with the clutch. We'll get to that point, but what I was looking for is to maintain the same pedal travel and clutch feel. We'll see how that pans out. There's some other beneficial changes that were made. I think this is the right choice, but we'll find out later. Sort of the same story on the brakes. So previously, our front circuit for the brakes was 3/4 inch, and our rear master cylinder for the brakes was a 5/8 inch. And what I did was step everything back down to 5/8 both front and back. And then I'm going to use the balance bar here with less aggressive adjustment to maintain the balance between the front and the rear. I found that before with the larger front cylinder, brake feel, well, part of it was the brake pedal. I think some of it was the larger master cylinder in front. There was a lot of things that added up to vague feeling in the brakes. And so what I'm hoping is that this will correct that. Now, most of our braking effort actually takes place in the back of the car, because that's where most of the weight is, except for under panic braking or really diving down at high speed into braking zones at the track. And then finally, the fronts can actually do some more work. And at about that time, you might actually get a 50-50 balance out of the rear and the front brakes. The tricky bit is you don't want the rear brakes locking up before the front brakes. And that's what the balance bar here will help with, is by adjusting this, there's a pivot inside here, and it moves right to left. And then as you push the pedal, it pivots. Now it's kind of a bad example, but there's no pressure or anything in the lines, but if the pivot is more on this side, it will bias this side so that this side will be more, I guess, resistant or what have you to this force or going in. And so the other side, the other master cylinder, will take more of the load, or vice versa. By adjusting that bias front to rear, you can change how the brakes behave at the track or on the street or whatever. So I have a cable here that fits in, and I'm gonna have to figure this out, because now with the lower height, this interferes with our gas pedal. So there's a 90-degree adapter I'm gonna put on the end here, and it's going to send the cable up behind the pedals. For now, I think I'm happy with the travel. I don't get any like noise or rubbing or anything like that. So I know the master cylinders have a good angle. Even though they look tight up here, we still have those little washers down underneath that kind of change the angle just a hair, so everything works perfectly. Again, these are the changes that I've made to upgrade from the factory bits, and we'll see if they work. Pretty much all we can do. Okay, so back over here on the bench, and we had worked on this previously, and I'd put it back together while we waited. Even though we had reassembled it, I was always worried that it was just going to blow garbage into the engine. I wasn't satisfied with the cleaning job that we had done, and at the end of the day, this is a $500 part, and I am not above just buying another one to save a $20,000 engine. So if I could rebuild it, great. If not, I would try to source another. I did find a company in Florida, BAT Inc., who does service these. They sell parts for them, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he was super helpful on the phone and was able to answer all my questions with regards to rebuilding them. I did, thanks to his help, get the core out, and you can see the this aluminum housing. There's really not a whole bunch to it. We have our channels for oil that will go through the top and the bottom, and then our usual coolant passages right through the middle here. We're set up here, ready for reassembly. I've got our housing in the vise here, made sure to stay clear of where the oil fittings sit, so as not to mar that surface. I've already put some oil inside the housing and got that lubed up, because when I pulled out the old core, I didn't really pull it out. I had to drive it out with a wooden dowel. That's the recommended removal method from the guys at BAT. He said, especially in this case where it was filled with engine debris, bearing material, and everything, that it is expected it would be difficult to remove, but they are able to break it loose and clear it out with a wooden dowel, just hammering on the core and carefully driving it out so you don't mar the housing. I've already taken the new core, and it doesn't look like it, but I have put oil down in the fins. They're just so thin, they soak up oil like crazy. And what we're going to do next is we're going to assemble this thing and get it put back together. Carefully line up our core. And, okay. Okay. I was expecting to have to drive that in. That fits very nicely. Okay, well, in that case, we have our gasket, which goes on next, like so. And then you have your O-ring, which goes on after that. And just like that, we're ready for the end piece. Remove the old O-ring. Just to make sure you don't accidentally cut the O-ring, put just a little dab of oil there. I don't know if you actually need to do this step. This is more comfort for me. Anyone who's accidentally cut or sliced an O-ring while assembling, I'm sure can share that terrible experience. And now, it also helps it seat a bit easier. And then lastly, we have our mounting bracket, which was missing earlier, but we're going to install this time so that we can mark and mount on the new firewall location. Just get our screws started by hand. Yeah, they're a little beat up, but things tend to look a little worse for wear once they've been on fire. Now just tighten it up. Carefully at first. And there we go. On to the other side. Lather, rinse, and repeat. Now we're going to do our oil fittings on the top and the bottom here. Carefully pry out our old oil O-rings. That's the first one. All right, and the second. Little dab of oil. Help the new O-ring sit just like that. So we have our 2 oil fittings. These are -12 fittings ready to go. All right, and now we're gonna tighten those. And there we have it. So this is our rebuilt oil to water heat exchanger. Again, a little worse for wear. A little fire never hurt anybody. Well, fire hurts a lot of people. We can rebuild after fire. That's what I'm getting at. There we have it. So this is our refurbished Laminova oil to water heat exchanger. We're going to set this aside for now, and we'll come back to it once we're done with the chassis and the rear bulkhead and the body, and we're getting closer to the engine installation. So the goal this time around was to keep it sort of short and sweet. Let me know how you guys like it. But we're able to finish up the 2 projects we had started earlier with the oil cooler and the brakes and master cylinders and the pedal setup. So let me know if you guys like these shorter episodes or shorter format, or if you don't mind me rambling on trying to explain my madness with this rebuild. So with that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.